Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
Both Keith and Josh sent me a story, and I saw the story reported in several different places, regarding a Court of Appeals case out of the Seventh Circuit. And it's such a strange case. It's been covered in a couple different places. The ABA Journal covered it, Law 360 covered it, and a couple others. So I actually went and just pulled the case itself. And so I've got in my hands the case of Robert Gaccio versus Anthony Wills. And it's a case that literally was decided less than a week ago. The opinion just came down, meaning this is brand new, hot off the presses as far as cases go. And it's an interesting case because I'm going to summarize it for you, and then we'll go through the details. A man was convicted in a trial where the judge had taken a bribe from a co-defendant. And the man was found guilty. And the judge later went to jail for taking bribes while on the bench from parties in front of him. Now, he didn't take a bribe from this guy, but he took a bribe from the other guy. So he was convicted at a trial overseen by a corrupt judge who had taken bribes during that trial about that trial. Those facts came out. And when this man filed an appeal and said, I deserve a new trial, the first court that heard that said, no, you don't. And I'm only laughing because I ought to be crying. It's sad. This is the kind of stuff that, as an attorney, makes me want to apologize to everybody for the legal profession. And it's a case where I think judges often get so disconnected from what they're reading and what they're arguing about that they think the law is some lofty thing up here. It's up in the atmosphere. It's up in the constellations. And they forget that the law is actually the rules between people. And the rules between people affect people. So Robert Gaccio, who was serving a life sentence for a crime allegedly committed in 1982, just now has been told you can have a new trial because your judge was corrupt. Even though before he'd raised the argument, no one argued that the judge wasn't corrupt. They just said, no, you don't get a new trial. So this is crazy. So starting at the beginning, Robert Gaccio serving a life sentence for the 1982 kidnapping and murders. Cook County Circuit Judge Thomas Maloney presided over the case. Thomas Maloney. This is the Court of Appeals writing. Maloney was corrupt. Maloney was corrupt. Not Maloney was alleged to be corrupt. Maloney was said to be. No, Maloney was corrupt. That's a very simple sentence. Maloney was corrupt. For years, he lined his pockets by soliciting cash for acquittals. To deflect attention and up the ante for bribes, he came down hard on defendants who could not or would not pay bribes to him. So in other words, his spiel was, pay me money, I'll let you off. Don't pay me money, you're going to jail. That was his scam. So Maloney's corruption was exposed in 1991. So we're talking like 10 years later. He was sent to federal prison. So when a judge goes to federal prison, you know that they've probably done something wrong. Meanwhile, Gaccio has been pursuing state and federal relief ever since. And so I'm not going to get too heavily into this, but if you get locked up on a state conviction that is wrongful in your mind, you can file appeals, and you file appeals in the state system. When you exhaust your appeals in the state system, you can then file motions in the federal system on a habeas corpus theory, which is that you want to be released because you've been locked up in a state system in contravention of your constitutional rights. And so there's a whole lot that goes into it, but that's the theory. So a lot of times there are states that will step all over your rights, and the federal courts are the ones who look at it and go, hey, what are they doing that for? So the corruption was exposed in 91. I became a lawyer in 91. And you may have heard me say that I've been practicing law for 30 years. This man has been in jail for 30 years after it was revealed that his judge was corrupt. Gaccio was charged and tried jointly with a co-defendant. But the latter, the other guy, waived his right to a jury verdict and opted for a decision from the bench. The reason became clear later. That man had paid the judge $10,000 for an acquittal. But because federal investigators were closing in, Maloney actually found that guy guilty, but still kept his money. So the judge found the other guy guilty. The jury returned a verdict of guilty against Gaccio, but the whole time the case was pending, the judge had taken a bribe from the co-defendant. So that will affect how the trial takes place, trust me. After Maloney was indicted, that's the judge, the other defendant won a new trial based on judicial bias. So the other guy said, hey, look, I paid the guy 10 grand. He still found me guilty. I want a new trial. So they gave him a new trial. That guy got a new trial. So in 2016, the Illinois Appellate Court finally resolved the claims, but then they denied relief. As relevant here, the court rejected the due process claim based on Maloney's corruption. The court held that Gaccio needed to prove that the judge was actually biased against him and had not done so. So the question is, you're in a trial. Unbeknownst to you, the co-defendant has flipped the judge $10,000 for a good outcome. Doesn't get it because the judge realizes he's under suspicion. But the point is that this trial that you're involved in has been tainted by somebody paying the judge $10,000. So this court reversed the lower decisions and says that the guy gets a new trial. He gets a new trial. And here we are all these years later. Like I said, the crime was committed in 1982. So the history of the case spans almost 4 decades. We traced the background when Gaccio's habeas proceedings were last before this court, and they tell all different details. But on the morning of December 12, 1982, a DuPage County forest ranger spotted a parked car in a remote area near the Des River and wound up discovering a crime scene that implicated these 2 guys. So Gaccio and Titone, I guess, I'm not sure how to pronounce the name, Titone, Titone, and another person were arrested. So 3 people were arrested. And it's a very, very serious crime. And the allegation was that Gaccio confessed, but later he moved to suppress his confession, claiming that the police beat him and ignored his request for counsel. Those motions were denied. And prosecution's case also included testimony from Gaccio's girlfriend who said she witnessed the crime. So it sounds like, as far as prosecutions go, they've got enough to prosecute the guy. The case against the third defendant was severed, but Gaccio and Titone were tried jointly in Judge Maloney's court. The proceedings had an unusual twist. The charges against Gaccio were submitted to the jury, but Titone waived a jury verdict and requested a decision from the bench. Both men were found guilty and sentenced to death. The Illinois Supreme Court vacated Gaccio's death sentence and on remand resentenced to life in prison. As the world now knows, again, Judge Maloney was corrupt. So this court is not tap dancing around on this one. For those of you taking notes at home, again, I'll repeat the sentence so you can write it down and get it correct. Judge Maloney was corrupt. The Operation Greylord undercover investigation caught Maloney in a long-running shakedown. Throughout the 1980s, he solicited and accepted bribes to fix cases. In 1991, a federal grand jury indicted him on racketeering and extortion charges. He was convicted in 1993 and sentenced to a 15-year term in federal prison. He died in 2008, not long after release from custody. Maloney's willingness to take bribes for acquittals had a sinister flip side. To deflect suspicion from his criminal scheme and give defendants an incentive to cough up bigger bribes, Maloney built a reputation as one of the most ruthless judges on the Cook County bench. He had a propensity to engage in so-called compensatory or camouflaging bias. Involved a different murder case, but they discussed this where they talked about how if you didn't give him money, he'd hammer you. So anyway, the co-defendant gave Maloney a $10,000 bribe, but Maloney convicted him anyway, and then a state trial judge later vacated that conviction because Maloney had a motive to convict Titone to deflect suspicion from himself. But apparently, they go, but he didn't have any motive to find Gaccio guilty because Gaccio wasn't involved in the bribery scheme. So meanwhile, Gaccio, the man sitting next to Titone at trial, also sought state collateral relief, but the proceedings moved at a glacial pace. He filed a pro se post-conviction motion in 91, soon after the indictment against Maloney was unsealed. Among other claims, he alleged a due process violation arising from Maloney's corruption. He also asserted that his attorney pressured him to raise $60,000 to bribe Maloney, but he was unable to come up with the money. So his attorney actually said, look, if we pay this guy off, we can get you out of here. He was unable to come up with the money. Gaccio amended his petition through appointed counsel in 97 and again in 08. The Cook County Circuit Court dismissed Gaccio's petition in 2009, but the Illinois Appellate Court reversed the dismissal of the judicial bias claim and remanded for an evidentiary hearing. So the hearing focused on Maloney's bias. Gaccio testified about the attorney's recommendation to bribe the judge. He also submitted affidavits from other people stating that the attorney had approached him about raising money for a bribe. Gaccio testified that when he and his family were unable to come up with the money, the attorney became disinterested in his case. The attorney testifying for the state denied having any conversation with Gaccio or his family about a bribe and asserted that he was actively involved in Gaccio's defense. Gaccio also presented evidence that T-Tone bribed Maloney. In an affidavit, T-Tone's father stated he paid Maloney $10,000 to fix the case. He also stated that Judge Maloney is coming up for an election for judicial retention in the fall of '84. And T-Tone's attorney said that as long as Maloney got 2 out of 3, it would be enough. This meant that as long as my son's 2 co-defendants were found guilty, Judge Maloney could get away with letting Dino go free, and Judge Maloney could still get elected. So the weird part about all of this is that they've known this for decades, okay? So getting back to the very, very basics, is 2 guys on trial in front of a judge for a very, very serious crime. And one of them has bribed the judge $10,000 to get off. The other one was told by his attorney, we can bribe the judge if you want to get off and scrape up this money, you'll get off. He can't scrape up the money, can't do it, doesn't bribe the judge. The judge finds them both guilty. They grant the other guy a new trial because he actually did bribe the judge. They won't grant this guy a new trial because he didn't bribe the judge. Like I said at the top, this is the kind of story that makes me want to apologize on behalf of the legal profession to all American citizens. Now, when I talk about the legal profession, I'm an attorney. I am not a judge. And what was going on here was a corrupt judge. And that judge went to jail for, I think, 15 years and deserved every single year of it. Should have gotten more. I'm a strong believer, and I've said this before, that people in positions of power, police officers, judges, and so on, need to be held to higher standards. They need to be examples. We can look up to them and say, yes, that is somebody we can aspire, if we could only aspire to be as good as them, society would be a better place. Guys like this are a cancer in our society. So when I see a case like this, where do you begin? But worse, this guy has gone through the court system now for decades, pointing out that you gave him a new trial because he bribed a judge. I was asked to bribe the judge, but didn't. But the judge was obviously corrupt. Don't I get a new trial? And up until last week, courts were repeatedly telling this guy, no. Why do you? No, you can't. Prove he was biased against you. Well, the man had a reputation where if you bribed him, he'd help you. If you didn't bribe him, he'd hurt you. We know that Gaccio didn't bribe the judge, so it would make sense that the judge would then hammer him in retaliation for not getting the bribe, which is how the guy was, because as they pointed out, Maloney was corrupt. Remember, we heard that a couple times. Maloney was corrupt. So this is one of those cases where when I first saw the summary of it, I thought to myself, that is so strange. And as I read the case, it got stranger. And what's most troubling, well, I don't know if you, what's most troubling about this? I'm not sure you can actually rank troubling things, But there's several things troubling about this. And one of them is simply that this crime happened in 1982. And this man is going to get a new trial. I wouldn't be surprised if it's 2022. 40 years later, we're going to have a trial about a crime that happened in 1982. But worse, the guy has spent decades in jail asking for a new trial. He's not asking to be let out. He's not asking to have the charges dismissed. He's simply saying, I want a fair trial. And what's strange about that, of course, is that a fair trial is one of the things that I think most people, without even thinking about it, go, yeah, the Constitution guarantees you a right to a fair trial. A fair trial. I mean, the guy wants a fair trial. One where the judge hasn't taken bribes from other defendants or solicited bribes from you. That seems like such a basic idea. Why was it such a fight for this guy to get this? And this is the kind of case where it's not just an indictment of the court system, because on the other side of this case is the state, right? The state of Illinois. The state of Illinois has fought this guy at every turn. So this guy discovers that the judge in his case was corrupt. His attorney should have been able to go to the prosecutor and go, that trial we had, or that trial you guys had, because you'd get a different attorney. The judge is corrupt. Can my guy get a new trial? They should just stipulate to it. Instead, they go, no. We're going to fight you on that. So they fight a couple decades down the road. Now, United States Court of Appeals, 7th Circuit, finds in favor and orders a new trial. Oh, guy gets a new trial now. Was there really any chance that the guy wasn't going to get a new trial? Makes you wonder. So it's a case called Gotcho versus Wills, and it's the United States Court of Appeals for the 7th Circuit. It's an amazing, bizarre, convoluted story, and it's a great example of justice delayed, as we say. The guy could get a new trial, could get found guilty, could go back to prison, or he could get time served, considering he spent about 30, 40 years in prison now. But the real question is, why wasn't he given a new trial before? So Keith and Josh sending me, thanks a lot. Questions or comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. What goes around comes around, and with kindness, this is truly the case.